Hello everyone, my name is Michael and I am speaking to you from the verse. Now if you're not sure what the verse is, I invite you to go to my website at rewritingtheverse.com, and that's where you can find out all the information about the verse. And I encourage you to go to the updates. There are a few written ones and all of the YouTube videos are accessible on there. So feel free to go back and check out all that I've done so far. I am a past life regressionist and a rewriter. So what that means is I have the ability not only to go back and look at past lives and look at what happened, why things happened, I also have the ability to go back in and rewrite the outcome to a higher level result. By doing that, not only does it heal the particular souls that are involved, but I've been using this gift to help the collective move through these various portals that we've been going through. This one is specifically connected to the 6/6/2020 portal that's coming up in just a few days. Today is June 2nd, 2020. And not only is that portal coming up, but the day before and also the day of, depending on where you live on the planet, there's also a lunar eclipse happening on June 5th or 6th, depending on where you're at. I have specifically been utilizing timelines that are connected to twin flames to help us through these portals. This one again appears to be a twin flame connection. I did a past life regression just before recording this, and so during this video I will go ahead and spell out the details of what I saw in that past life regression. However, I have not formally put a rewrite in place. I have found that that's very powerful to do live here with you on video, and then you and I both can experience together whatever major shift occurs out of rewriting the timeline. So that could be very exciting, and like I said, even I don't know how that's going to go. So that will be towards the end of this video, so please stick around for that. Just to acknowledge a few things have changed since the last video I did, maybe about a month ago now. The last several videos I had done, I was in a different location. I live here in Texas, USA, and we have been in kind of a lockdown situation with the COVID stuff for quite a while. Actually, it's not officially been lifted, but I was spending the first few months with a friend just to make the experience a little easier. And but now I'm back home, and I have been here for several weeks now. However, another change, so I'm back in the original room that I was doing the videos prior to that. I do want to acknowledge that there was a picture up above the couch back there that's you would have seen in any of the previous videos that I did here. And as of the last couple days, that picture has fallen behind that couch. And it had been up there over 2 years with no difficulty staying up. It was a picture of a bridge, actually. And it's no coincidence that energetically I've been doing a lot of spiritual work, and the entire collective actually has been going through a transition and literally crossing energetic bridges to get to higher level vibrations and frequencies. So when I realized that had fallen just yesterday, I noticed that. And yesterday seemed to be a completion day for the bridge energy I was personally working on. I'd say that that represented something. The bridges are down, whatever that means, but in a good way. As far as I know, everybody that needed to get across that bridge did. And the collective will continue to move on into higher levels of frequency. So I'm not going to put that picture back up. It's either going to stay behind that couch, or I might, pass it on to someone else. But I'm going to leave it the way it is, and it just said 444 right there on the clock right there. So who knows? what is supposed to be there next. I guess we'll see. I'm not going to fill it with just anything. We'll see what wants to be brought into this space. This is my spiritual space, and things are changing. We don't need to hold the bridge anymore. Something else is probably ready to come in. So anyway, just to acknowledge that there's been some changes in the energy in my own spiritual space and of course on the globe, on the planet. And moving forward, as this COVID thing, it continues, but things are moving again, let's just say that. And well, I think things could really take off. This past life regression that I'm about to share with you, I think actually it is symbolic about leaving old patterns behind, old ways of being behind, taking a risk. And this is connected to U.S. history as well, this particular timeline. So it really is about taking risks to places we may have never been before, whether it's energetically or physically. So I'm going to go ahead and start sharing with you about the past life regression that I just, semi-completed. I haven't done the rewrite yet, so it's not fully complete. And I want to tell you the details about it, and then we'll see what plays out at the end. So I can't remember if I mentioned it earlier in the video or not, but I do utilize twin flame, divine masculine, divine feminine timelines. And so this is once again another one. And so I specifically asked for one that will be linked to this 6/6/2020 portal. And this is what they showed me. So approximately 400 years ago, they showed me, my initial vision was a young woman kind of running past me, actually, kind of pretty quickly running. Didn't look like she was running from anything. In fact, she looked really happy. So it took me a minute to figure out, well, why is she running and what's she so happy about? But first I want to describe how she was dressed. So she was a young woman, I'm believing like 17, 18 years old. She had blonde hair, but it was kind of pulled back with like a handkerchief kind of head covering. She wore a pretty simple blue dress with like this white apron looking thing over it. And she was running in clogs or wooden shoes. So I immediately knew where we were, thanks to the wooden shoes. We were in the Netherlands, we were in Holland, in that area. Again, about 400 years ago. And she's, like I said, running really fast. She's got one small bag kind of over her shoulder, and that's it. In fact, she was trying to run so fast, and apparently clogs aren't good to run in. Wooden shoes aren't good to run in, because she actually ended up taking them off and just carrying them so she could run faster in her bare feet. So what I understood was she had been, I don't know if you call it a milkmaid or whatever, she had worked on a dairy for about 5 years. Now, if she's 17 or 18 now, that means she would have been 12, 13 or so when she started working there. What I was told was that she had been, there's something called an indentured servant. And I don't know if it was used in any other way except, for instance, the Mayflower and those early crossings of the Atlantic, where you would work off, like for instance, some people wanted to cross, but they didn't have the funds to, so they would go with other people and agree to be their servants for a certain amount of time to help pay their way across. So what I got is this was kind of the reverse of that. Apparently her parents. She had a mother, father, and 2 younger siblings, brothers. What I was shown was 5 years before, her parents, her father specifically, had arranged for her to work on this dairy full time. I mean, like, she lived there, and it was an arrangement so that the family would be given funds, money, to be able to follow their dream of relocating to another part of that country. So they had told her, you know, this is a great thing you're doing for us, and we'll get everything set up over there. So when you're done in 5 years, you look us up in the city, which, by the way, was Leiden, or not Leiden, Leiden, Leiden. Come find us in 5 years there, and we'll have everything set up, and we'll just, you know, celebrate your arrival and take good care of you, that you're doing, you know, because you're doing this wonderful thing for the whole family by basically being a slave for 5 years. So somehow she was able to believe that this was a good thing that she was doing with her family. So there wasn't a whole lot of frustration or anger, really just missing her family, just wanting to be with them. But really she believed that she was doing a good thing. So she was to stay there, and the people that she stayed with are the ones that gave the family whatever money it took to get them. I guess they had to get someplace where there was a port, and then they took a boat to wherever they were headed. Okay, so the 5 years are up. This is why she's running. Like, literally, she milked her last cow. You know, she's literally running so that she can go catch up with her family now. She had just enough for whatever fare the cost was going to be to go to where they were at. And she couldn't wait. And she did. She made her way down there, took whatever boats it took to get to Leiden. And yes, she found her family. So the reason they went to Leiden was, I looked some things up afterwards to I actually learned some new things. They went to Leiden because there was, the early pilgrims, or a group of them, were there in Leiden, Netherlands. You know, of course, you know, the U.S. can be a bit egocentric and think everything begins and ends here. Well, if you aren't aware, the pilgrims were already moving around trying to find, you know, safe places to express their religions. And so actually a group from England had originally gone to the Netherlands as an attempt to gain their spiritual freedom and practice the way they wanted to practice and all those things. And I think I read maybe about 12 years, I could be wrong about these numbers, I think about 12 years before the first Mayflower is when they went over there, something like that. So there was this group over there practicing what they were practicing, and her family were going, they had heard about this, and they were going there to be a part of this. And what I got is her family was not very religious at all. So even this didn't seem to make a whole lot of sense, but hey, the parents were all about it, and you know, who was she to question? So that was supposedly why they were going down there, was to join this group that would eventually be a part of the Mayflower pilgrimage to the U.S. Okay, so she gets there and she finds her family. Now, when I looked up the Mayflower, I had not made a distinction before, if I had ever run across it, that there were two different groups of pilgrims on that Mayflower, the original Mayflower. There was a large group from England, and there was a small group from this Netherlands group that were also on the Mayflower. and that both of the groups kind of worked together to finance and ultimately have what it took to be able to travel across the Atlantic together in one ship. So here we have pilgrims before they ever get to the U.S. So that was interesting. So basically that was their first attempt to leave and go to a different country, but they had concerns, about staying where they were at. Not everybody left over there. In fact, obviously only a handful, I think it was like 35 people from that group ended up going on the Mayflower. So a lot of them stayed behind, including, her family did not go on the Mayflower. She did. Wasn't her idea either. So I have to say I'm not impressed with this young lady's family. I don't like, seeing what I see sometimes in these past lives, because some people are just bad people. Sorry, I'm judging her family, but that's my feeling about them, because after 5 years of servitude, she did help get them to that place, and they did set up shop there, and they were doing actually very financially well compared to especially what they were before they left. They were really poor. In fact, they made quite a bit that they probably could have paid off her debt long earlier and had her move down with them. But they didn't seem too concerned about whether or not she was with them. In fact, when they finally saw her showing up, they weren't excited about it. And they certainly weren't appreciative of all that she had done. In fact, they wanted her to run out and get a job real quick and contribute some more in whatever way. But ultimately, they were within, I want to say, a couple months of the Mayflower sailing. By the way, in September of this year, 2020, it's the 400th anniversary of the Mayflower. I guess it departed in September. Yeah, I think it departed in September and landed in November, something like that. I don't remember exactly, but 400 years exactly right now for the Mayflower. So it seems to not be a coincidence either, since it represents so much about supposedly the American dream and all that. So how did she get on that boat if her parents weren't on there? Well, I was being told about her, mainly her father, but her mom pretty much was right along with him. Like I said, they weren't overly spiritual to begin with, and here they are all into this group of very extreme spiritual or religious people. So what I was being told was basically he was more of an opportunist. He saw that with this particular group, he could rise to the top. It was a small group, and so if he, pledged allegiance and, basically pretended to go along with it anyway, he was able to move up pretty quickly towards the top of the hierarchy, I guess, in the group. But he also was very interested in the money side of it. Now, one thing I can draw on historically for me, something I read years ago, was there was a lot of money-motivated energy behind sending pilgrims to the New World, okay? Ultimately, the people that funded them going were definitely the people that were interested in getting rich, interested in making money off of whatever could be established over there, and really employed a lot of the pilgrims, whether consciously or subconsciously, to go over there and set up shop. And her father was all about that. He saw dollar signs, and he was right. He had already leveled himself up financially by being involved, but there was more to be had over there. However, he didn't necessarily want to make the trek, neither did his wife. I mean, everybody knew it was dangerous, a long, hard journey. That would probably be hard, especially, not knowing what to expect over there. So yeah, he wasn't necessarily wanting to go, but here is this daughter showing up after all these years, and he saw an opportunity. Well, one, to get rid of her, because he didn't want to have to support another person. Certainly wasn't missing her when she was gone. So one, part of it may have been to try to get her over there so he would be able to say he had a connection over there. And he told her when he finally, well, he was driving whatever little horse-drawn thing that they were in, her and him, as they were going towards the boat that would take them to the major boat, that, oh, by the way, didn't even tell her ahead of time. By the way, I've made an arrangement, and you're going to get to go to America, this great, amazing journey that so many in the church would just love to do, and she has the privilege to do it, and go over there and set up shop over there, and then your mother and I will follow you over there, and we can be a family again. Oh, and by the way, you need to be an indentured servant to go. So he literally dropped her off at the boat where she meets the man and his wife that are taking responsibility for her, that have paid her passage and actually paid him. I get that he did get paid basically to take her. So it wasn't just, he was getting some sort of financial kickback. And again, back chat is that pretty much talked to the guy about taking her, and well, you've got a wife and all, but it's treacherous out there. What if she doesn't make it? Wouldn't it be wise to have a second option? Okay, I'm just saying. Don't like this father. Anyway, but she's not told that part. Of course not. She's going to go over there. She's going to do the indentured servant thing, set up shop over there so that the family can follow behind and they can be a happy family over there. Lies. I saw that actually the family had no intention of moving over there, but anything that they could get out of her being over there, oh, absolutely, they were all about that. So anyway, that man had taken her on as an indentured servant, and so she crossed the Atlantic. So again, wasn't her idea. And at this point, she clearly knows her dad is, well, I think the writing's on the wall that he's basically just throwing her off to the side, getting rid of her, and yeah, pretty sure she's aware of that money exchange. So whatever dreams she had of having a happy family are pretty much dashed. And just as we've heard in history books, it was a horrible crossing as far as like dysentery, rats, starvation, people dying. It was not a pleasant experience. I mean, I see her not very long into it, and they're all dirty, and I mean, I don't know how they did it, quite honestly. It was a pretty rough ride. And I get that she actually very easily got seasick. It didn't even take much in the way of waves for her to get seasick. So she lost a lot of weight actually on that trip for that reason. And the fact that they were all starving too. But however, one bright spot, the bright spot in all of this, is she met a young man. He also was going across as I don't get that he was really a servant. He was an apprentice of the man and his family that he went with. So they were both teenagers, but older teenagers. I'm going to say they were both around 17 or 18 years old. So she met this young man. I'm gonna give you a couple names for them. These are our twin flames, by the way, our divine masculine, divine feminine. I'm gonna give you the names just based on what came to me when I looked at the passenger lists for the Mayflower. I do believe they're due to some things that came up just prior to me doing the past life regression, that there was a teenager named Dorothy on the ship, and I do believe the other one was a young man, again teenager, named Robert. So I'm going to call them Dorothy and Robert. Okay, and they met, and as twin flames tend to do, they get connected very deeply, very quickly, and it doesn't take long for them to, really build whatever bond they could in such horrible circumstances. But whenever they could get away, they did. They would find a quiet spot and talk about their dreams, talk about what led them to that point. I mean, she shared about her crummy childhood and now crummy situation that she was in now, and now the young man didn't feel so bad about his situation. I don't think, when the idea came up about his he's an apprentice to a shoemaker, actually, that I think he was very okay with going and starting anew in a new world. So he wasn't in that kind of circumstance. Plus, I think he liked his employer. So, but anyway, they would talk about their dreams. And one of the things that started becoming obvious to Dorothy was that the man that she was a servant to, even though he had a wife, he would look at her with, in a certain way that lets you know somebody's interested in you more than just a servant, okay? The only thing that really protected her there on the ship was it was such close quarters, plus his wife was usually right there. And his wife was visibly, obviously jealous. She knew exactly what was going on too, as far as catching him looking at her that way, and just being very threatened by this young woman going on this trip with him and living in their quarters or whatever. She was not happy at all. She ends up being even worse than him in a lot of ways. So, but anyway, it's during the trip that they actually get to know each other, fall in love with each other, Robert and Dorothy. And, by the time they land, they're in love and they want to get married. Problem is, well, there's several problems. One, there's some sort of this contract to be their servant. And then two, I don't think they quite had positions figured out yet as far as who was going to do what in the village and who was going to hold what office. I think as far as setting up any kind of real government, that was probably low priority, or at least not the top priority if you're getting off a ship and you're already not doing well, and you have, I think it was November when they landed, so in Massachusetts, I mean, come on, we're already talking snow and things like that. Probably not a high priority to get all the government laid out right away. So my understanding is, based on some of the research I saw today, was that at least the leading group of pilgrims experienced over there in the Netherlands the idea of civil marriage. In other words, just going like to a justice of the peace and getting legally married that way and not having to go through a ceremony, a spirit or religious ceremony. And I think in general, that's what they would have needed to do to be able to come together the way they did. As far as Robert goes, I don't think he was nearly as concerned about the religious stuff as some of the other pilgrims. But that was probably something that was going to be set up. And so even though they wanted to right away, there were issues, like I said. At 17 and 18, they were probably old enough to make that choice for themselves. Now, whether or not that would have negated her her contract as being a servant, I think that's questionable. I don't think they really knew. I don't think anybody would have probably known for sure, because it's like the first time anybody's ever done this, right? So who knows? But as much as they knew, and they were correct, that it was going to be a problem for her living with that other guy, they couldn't act on that right away. But they knew they wanted to. By that point, they knew that they wanted to have their own little family. So, I believe he even approached the person that, I guess if you want to say, owned Dorothy at this point, and offered to, do whatever it took to pay off her debt, to, that she could come live, because apparently the shoemaker that he's the apprentice for is fine with her coming to live over there. Those people are pretty cool. From what I could tell, they're like, whatever you want to do, oh, you want to bring her over here? Sure, whatever. But the other guy was just like, no, you can't have her. End of discussion. She's mine. So, and as long as they weren't like officially married or whatever, they didn't feel like they really had much they could do. And as time went on, and it didn't take very long, probably within a few months, things got worse in that household. The man became more physically abusive towards Dorothy. Like anytime she didn't move fast enough or whatever stupid reason, he would smack her. 1 or 2 smacks and that would be it, which I guess was better than what the wife would do to her, who just hated her just for breathing and being in the space, and felt so threatened by her presence that she would make switches out of branches to beat her with, just for nothing at all, just for breathing, really. And she would go into jealous rages. It was bad. So she was probably even worse than he was. But there was always a threat. I think it was only a matter of time until he finally just forced himself on her. And, that was coming. That was pretty clear. So both Dorothy and Robert realize that they've got a time bomb over there that they've got to deal with. And I think, again, one of the holdups is they can't figure out how can they get married. I'm sure there were some pastors there, whether from the leading group or from the English side, but I don't think it might have been because he wasn't that, or neither one of them were actually really very religious. That didn't seem to be an option. Only a civil marriage seemed to be an option, and that was taking a bit of time for somebody to be identified to do that. Well, time ran out. So what I saw was, I saw Dorothy out behind the little shack of a house that the man and his wife lived in. She was chopping wood. So the typical, have an axe, chopping wood. And I guess what set the wife off this time was that she kind of walked around a corner or something and saw him really just leering at Dorothy. Dorothy I don't even think she was aware. She was just busy chopping wood, but he was watching her and looking very whatever. And that's all it took. The woman went over, just in a rage, went over, started hitting her on the back with her hands, whatever. And Dorothy drops or sets down the axe. Problem is that because all she was doing at this point is just trying to protect her face and keep from getting hit any worse than usual, right? It's not the first time. Only this time, the wife picks up the axe. And she does swing, and she does catch her pretty good across the shoulder line here. And Dorothy bleeds to death right there in the snow. And basically I'm just told that they made up some story about her cutting wood and cutting herself bad enough to bleed to death out there. They just found her out there. That she had accidentally hurt herself and whatever. I don't know how they got rid of the body, because it's pretty obvious that she got cut up here, but whatever. Back then, I doubt anybody was going to question. Especially if they were in any way actually considered high up in the church. Right? You can say pretty much anything. Nobody's going to question. And they certainly didn't have probably a police officer to investigate anything, so they just got away with it. Really. And of course, you know, Robert finds out and he's distraught. And it's once again two twin flames being separated, not having that happily ever after. And one thing I'm remembering that I forgot to say earlier, while they were on the boat, okay, early on, I remember she had those wooden shoes, right? You know, and not that the wooden shoes were bad shoes, but when it came to keeping your feet warm, they were not very good. And so, you know, whenever he started noticing her and wanted to approach her, he actually, because he's an apprentice, and he's actually a very good apprentice. My ear just rang. Very good apprentice. He actually made her shoes, regular shoes, out of leather and whatever. But he also was good at stitching, like designs. So he actually not just made the shoe, but he made little red, like flowers on the shoes. And that is how he first approached her on the boat. Once he got those done, he went up to her one night when she was trying to keep her feet warm and rub them and whatever, and said, "Here, try these." And she'd always worn wooden shoes. It's pretty much typical for the culture and everything, at least over there in, over there in the Netherlands, because remember, she was not a part, her family was not a part of the original group that left England to come to the Netherlands and then to leave again. No, her family was from the Netherlands. So she's always worn these, but she put these shoes on and she could not believe the comfort. It was, I got the term like it was like having clouds on her feet. One, they were so much lighter than wood, right? So it's like almost like picking your feet up too much, but also just so much softer on her feet. And this is how he said hello and sat down and started talking to her. And you know, she never wore those wooden shoes again. She kept them. But she wore those shoes every day, all day. Unless it was like raining or something maybe. But anyway, those meant so much to her on so many different levels. And of course, she was in love with him, so they meant even more, right? So anyway, I didn't want to forget the part about the shoes. So yeah, that's what happened in the first version. Pretty crummy. Pretty crummy on lots of different levels. So once I see the highlights of a past life regression and understand whatever it is I need to understand, then I will ask my guides and whoever else is helping with the reading, where would be the most powerful to step in and do something different? And then, you know, get whatever seems to be the best alternate outcome. So they showed me going back to the ship while they were getting to know each other on the ship. They would have been married right away in Plymouth. Of course, that's the name of the original colony, right? They would have gotten married right away had there been somebody to marry them. Again, for whatever reason, it wasn't appropriate for them, or they didn't want to be married by one of the pastors. So this is where they needed to look at another alternative. What I got was, they were so in love already, they had another option of somebody to marry them. And that would have been the captain of this boat, the Mayflower. Now, I don't want to go into a lot of details because I don't know a lot of details about why captains of ships are just as good and legal at marrying people as a pastor or some other type of thing, but they were viewed that way. They didn't consider that. Either they underestimated how long it was going to take when they got there. Whatever the case is, they did not. They didn't see that as a possibility. And if anybody was qualified to actually do a civil marriage, apparently the captain would have been it. So I'm already feeling energy right now as, I'm not sure which one now. It doesn't really matter who came up with the idea. It just wasn't explored. Either it was thought about, it wasn't talked about. I'm not sure why they felt like they needed to wait. Maybe they wanted just to get married in the new land. Could have been young people. Or old people for that matter that are in love, Oh, the symbolism of getting married in a new land, in our new shack. Living happily ever after, right? Well, anyway. They really needed to get her out of that situation. And I think it was questionable whether or not actually getting married would actually end that contract with him. But this time, they decide we're going to go ahead and do it. We're not going to tell anybody. They didn't even tell the nice shoemaker guy. Just one night when they would actually typically be able to find some time to themselves, they went up, they found the captain and said, "We're in love. We would be married right now." I actually see the captain with a jug of whiskey or whatever going, "Sure, why not?" Why not? And within minutes, they're married. Now, okay. All right, I'm seeing a little bit more here. The captain isn't just the person that can marry them. I think he's actually the person that could enforce it. In other words, kind of act as the police on the ship as well, or the judge or whatever. So he had lots of different abilities out there on the water. Because I think it's very important that they announce it. And I think it's important that they announce it in front of many people, not just say specifically only to the guy and his wife, but that everybody knows. We just got married. We're in love. We just got married. Now the offer is still there to buy out whatever he is owed for the time that she's not going to be his servant anymore. But as far as him being hers, I think now is where everybody's like, well, how does this work? The key here is not just that they got married. Although that helped. That helped. What was not understood maybe by any of them until it was actually talked about. I was like, well, I own her. Her father and I have this agreement, and can't go back on that. It's a contract, or whatever he said, right? Well, when you have endangered servants. Wow, okay. Well, she was an endangered servant. Well, now, wasn't she? Interesting. When you have indentured servants, according to what I'm understanding here, when they're young, too young, yes, that arrangement can be made between the parents, etc. I mean, honestly, I looked on that list of people, passengers. Why do these people have indentured servants, boys and girls, that are 6, 7, and 8 years old? I'm not going to make a blanket statement about these pilgrims, but there were definitely plenty of them that were not, in my opinion, very Christian-y, or any other religion for that matter. Now, I'm not saying all of them, obviously. I think some of them actually had pure intentions, but the problem is, just like any society, by the way, there's always those that hide behind religion or hide behind some sort of ideal and do terrible things anyway. So this group is basically no different than any other, and they had their share of domestic violence, child abuse, probably rape. A lot happened on that ship too. But that wasn't going to change just because they were now living in separate little shacks. In fact, now they're away from, and even the captain would be gone. Now they really get to create their own rules, and well, who knows what that looked like. I really don't think the first year or two or more of these colonists was necessarily all pure. But anyway, that was 400 years ago. Hopefully we've grown a bit as a country, although with what's going on right now in society, I think that's still questionable. But anyway, going back, okay, so they've announced that they're married now. He's saying, but I have a contract, you can't break this contract, yada, yada, yada. Well, how old is this girl? Well, she's 17 or 18. Well, did she consent to that? What? Well, no. Her father and I have this agreement. Well, basically because of her age, she should have been the one. Otherwise, it truly is a slave trade. At least with the indentured servant title, it doesn't seem that people are being enslaved, even though, yeah, probably a lot of them were. So because of her age, and she did not consent to the agreement, the captain deemed that contract null and void, and that their marriage would stand, and that when they departed from the boat, and actually starting right in that minute, she owed nothing to them, and was able to stay with now her new husband and the man and the family that he was connected to. And they were very nice. They took her in. Just, I love that family. We all need families like that. Well, anyway, so when I rewrite this, because that's what we're going to change, we're actually going to have them seek out the captain and get married right there on the spot. And as that plays out, it's going to shift things obviously for those two souls, right? But it will shift things for the collective. And you are all a part of the divine feminine, divine masculine, twin flame collectives. You are. It will impact you as well, no matter what. So, try to build up the energy here in a minute. And I declared that to be so now. So that timeline is shifting right now. 400 years ago, almost exactly 400 years ago, on that ship, somewhere out at sea in the Atlantic, Robert and Dorothy are marrying right now. And that's shifting everything. That's shifting everything. This is going to change Plymouth, Massachusetts. Because this has changed everybody's, even their own ideals, as they're getting off that boat with different ideas than they did the first time. And they are thinking about personal freedom. And they had a really rough road, and a lot of it was, they got to hear that man and his wife arguing constantly. And yes, there was domestic violence there, especially since they couldn't take it out on Dorothy. Oh yeah. Continued once they got off the boat too. But it didn't affect Dorothy anymore. I do think, who was it? Somebody's going to become, whoever the justice of the peace, whoever it is that can do civil unions, marriages, is going to be identified right away, probably before they get off the ship, because they realize it's important to have at least certain positions already filled. So by the time they get there, that's not having to be worried about. They have all this time on this ship to be talking about these things. And apparently what I read, again, is that in Leiden, in the Netherlands, they do learn about, because again, this main group came over from England first before they went on. They learned in the Netherlands about the idea of government, about electing people into certain positions. You know, they brought that type of knowledge with them from the Netherlands. Oh, fun fact that I also learned in all of this, Thanksgiving, okay? Not surprisingly, the United States has laid claim to the Thanksgiving holiday, you know, because can't give credit to where credit's due. Based on my reading this afternoon, I found out that actually Thanksgiving was a holiday that the Netherlands celebrated already, based on some freedom from some siege, from something. But every year they would have a feast like that, and they would give thanks, and I guess they called it Thanksgiving. So that's where the Pilgrims learned about that kind of celebration, and then just played it out here in the US. So once again, we need to give some credit to where credit is due. Now granted, was it the first Thanksgiving in the United States that year? Probably, yeah. But it certainly didn't originate here. So thank you, Netherlands, for giving us some cool stuff. So anyway, we have rewritten it now. That was a formal rewrite. So I'm trying to see now, how does this impact people? Yes, they do elections right there on the ship, at least on the important types of positions. So when they land, they're already, they need somebody like a police officer, somebody that's going to actually, you know, uphold whatever law they decide is law. And I think it might end up being that shoemaker that ends up being like the justice of the peace. He's such a nice guy. I'd say I really like him. I would love for him to be the justice of the peace, because he's like, oh, you want to get married? Oh, sure, come on in, let's do it. He's not going to be judgmental. Whatever, come on in, let's get married. And because he's doing I guess he's been given, either voted into that, and or the captain of the ship is able to bestow that on him somehow. He's able to fill that position. So yeah, people can still, they want to go to their little pastors connected to their religion, that's great. But it was clear from the beginning that you needed to have impartial people. Dare I say, maybe the first real elections in the United States happened on the Mayflower, the original Mayflower. And I really get, on a ship full of people that are religious, right? And maybe only a handful that maybe not be as wrapped up in that. They saw the necessity of having an impartial alternate group, at least in the governing positions. Because even though both sides were pilgrims, they still came from slightly different ideals, or maybe not so slightly. And maybe they saw the need to have some checks and balances, maybe, so that one or the other didn't dominate. In fact, it was probably the ones from Leiden that would have been dominated, because there were, number-wise, a lot fewer of them. So it could have even been the Leiden ones that really pushed for elections. Well, and Robert came from the other group, the ones from England, so his person, the shoemaker, would have been, elected, I think, just because he's a really nice guy. I really get that he would have been impartial. That's what you really need. I mean, you want to have somebody, if you're going to have somebody who's a judge or anybody that's making any judgment calls, you want somebody who's going to be able to see things without bias. Yeah. So this is before they even get off the boat. So as they are setting up Plymouth, how does this impact things? There's more order, less chaos, because when nobody's running the show, or very few people are running the show, a lot can happen. A lot of people can just call their own shots, do what they want, cover up murders, because in that first version, that may have been the first murder in Plymouth that was deemed an accident, but still. What else? There's something else. There's something else. The American dream. American dream. Well, I'm not sitting here saying that I know anybody who really lives what the American dream really is supposedly out there for people to get to. Oh, okay. Well, remember I said the funding to get them over there was financial. I mean, it was financially motivated. People that paid for that weren't supporting their freedom of religion. They were supporting money in their pocket and expecting, trade to come back, and that's the only way they were willing to pay for that. Certainly wasn't the pilgrims themselves that really came up with that money. So I'm getting that this has something to do with the trade system. Oh my goodness. Because from the very beginning, if you look at it, the trade system, the money system, is what founded the U.S. Well, this version of it now. I'm not saying, obviously, the Native Americans were totally mistreated, and I want to acknowledge that they were here first, and we were pretty pretty ruthless in coming in and taking it, what we did. So we took it in a negative way anyway, and of course you got money motivating people. Oh yeah, that's what happens when it's all about money. People die, get abused, misused, whatever. Yeah, so this is like the very first time that money is used to establish things in the US with this particular scenario, people involved, groups involved. There's something about this that changes everything. Oh my goodness. Okay. We got the right people in power. Those elections on that vote, like I said, I really liked that guy, that Shoemaker dude. He needed to be the justice of the peace. Probably the judge for whatever crimes that could happen or whatever other things. I'm sure he did lots of different things, but he still did shoes. I really get that he still made some darn good shoes, and so did Robert. When you get the right people in power positions, the people that are really standing for the people and not for the money, not for the traders, not bending rules or totally, dismissing rules because somebody is offering money and bribes. Yes, there were plenty of people within Plymouth that were about the money or easily bought. So from the very beginning, the rules were changing, and the rich were getting richer and the poor were getting poorer. It started there, and then it just, over time, can we really blame all of this on Plymouth? I'm getting that it was an important moment in time. And thanks to Robert and Dorothy standing up for their love, doing whatever it took to free her from that situation, the leadership in that town and in future colonies, because there are more ships going to come. Multiple ships over the next, 10 plus years at least, bringing more supplies and more people, more colonists. So, but they're going to come and they're going to look at Plymouth as a template. And now the template isn't flawed. Now there's something even better. Like I said, it's about fairness, proper leadership with integrity. I think that's a good word for it. Well, isn't that what we're looking for even now with the world governments, right? I do believe actually there's a lot going on behind the scenes that we can't see to remedy how out of control things have gotten over the last 200 years. Well, that's since we actually were an official country. Go back even 400 years. 400 years almost exactly to when we first set a toe here and proclaimed that this was our country. Right or wrong, right? Whatever the case is. Okay, now they're telling me something else. So I did learn some history. That group from Leiden specifically, I don't really look as much at the other ones, so there may be people from the England group that also has something similar going on, but specific to the Leiden group, there have been 9 US presidents that can trace their roots back to those 35 Leiden Mayflower passengers. Whether you like those presidents or not, I think we can actually say that that might be evidence of certain people from that group taking hold in Plymouth, and that the presidencies are actually evidence of at least one group that has dominated the political world. How much you want to bet that those people were probably some of the ones, at least, that got into power positions. And if they were tied to money, if they were tied to bribes, or just, fill in their own pockets, well, I'm just saying, this new version, this rewrite, doesn't have those people in power anymore. No more. Now there are just people, integritous people in those positions. And I get that, yes, there's trade. Absolutely, there's trade. But it is not allowed to supersede the integrity of Plymouth or any other colony. And the idea of actually having freedom, who knows, this could even, totally change the civil, or not the Civil War, but the American Revolution, because, at that point, trying to break free of especially the financial stranglehold that at least England had on us, right? Well, maybe if things were done differently earlier, we wouldn't have had to do that. I'm just really getting this as a shift of power politically. And we're getting the right people in at the right time. All that's going on right now to try to correct this out of control train wreck of a global society, politically at least, so much effort. Well, 400 years ago, it's now been done right. And for Dorothy and Robert, I get that they actually lived there maybe their whole life. And it's a peaceful life. And they play key roles in the community. They're absolutely pillars of the community. And they uphold the integrity. Yeah. Wow. The Mayflower just became a lot more interesting. Okay, I think that was the highlights. And definitely, oh, by the way, right after this, I'm going to record a brief follow-up video to this one, where I will speak and pretty much only talk about the outcome here, and I'm definitely going to be talking about the integrity in politics. That seems to be a big one. Just by following your heart, doing what it takes, doing what the twin flames chose to do, which was what it takes to follow their heart and do what they wanted to do. And they went to the right person that could make the difference in the right timing, because once that ship had sailed, they lost that. And they were always behind the 8 ball after that. So, okay, I will attach that link below. I appreciate all of you. If you're still here, thank you very much. Thank you very much. Definitely for the solstice coming up, June, I think it might be the 20th, I'll have to double check, is the solstice. And so I will be definitely doing a video for that, and possibly, I'm not 100% sure yet about the eclipse, the solar eclipse coming up later in the month. I may do one for that. The lunar eclipse happens on the 5th and 6th, and I didn't want to do a separate one since this is right backed up next to it, which is another reason why it's going to be an extra powerful portal. But I appreciate you all. Thank you for being here, and until next time, peace and joy.